Of course it was mortgaged. Of course the woman who'd spent 18 months telling me I understood Thailand better than any farang she'd ever met had gone to a finance company in Surat Thani the week after the title deed transferred into her name and borrowed 4.8 million baht against the property I'd paid for. Of course the buyers were already lined up when I thought I was still in the planning stage. Of course when I finally walked into a land office in Koh Samui to do what I should have done before I handed over a single dollar, the officer looked at the Chanote, full ownership title deed, record on his screen, and then looked at me with an expression I will remember for the rest of my life. Not pity exactly, more like the professional compassion of a doctor who has seen the test results and is choosing their words carefully. Of course, naturally, what else did I expect? I was a 71-year-old retired civil engineer from Canberra who had spent 45 years building bridges and water treatment plants and road infrastructure across 3 continents, who had reviewed more construction contracts and site surveys and foundation assessments than most people will read documents in a lifetime. And I walked into a Thai property purchase with the breezy confidence of a man who believes his professional credentials protect him from the kind of mistake that happens to other people. They don't. Nothing protects you from the kind of mistake that happens when you decide, in advance, that you can't be fooled. My name is Gerald. I'm 71 years old, and I'm living in a 2-bedroom unit in Gungahlin, on the outskirts of Canberra, that I'm renting from a property management company for $1,850 a month, which absorbs a substantial portion of the superannuation income that was supposed to fund a very different kind of retirement. The house in Koh Samui, the one I designed the layout for myself, the one where I specified the drainage gradient and the concrete specifications for the retaining walls and the load-bearing calculations for the elevated deck overlooking Chaweng Noi Bay, is now occupied by someone else. I don't know who. The mortgage on it, which I never authorized and didn't know existed for 14 months, was evidently serviced by the proceeds of its sale. I haven't been back to Koh Samui since April 2023. I'm not going back. Let me tell you about Waranya before I tell you about the property, because without understanding Waranya you won't understand how a civil engineer, with 45 years of professional skepticism about structural claims, got taken apart as efficiently as I did. Waranya was 30 years old when I met her, which made her 41 years younger than me. And the first thing I'll tell you is that I was aware of that arithmetic and thought about it more carefully than people assume. I'm not a romantic. I'm not a man who confuses admiration for wisdom or youth for integrity. I have managed large project teams for most of my working life, and I have been lied to by people who were very good at it. I thought I knew how to read people. What I didn't know was that Waranya was specifically good at reading engineers. I need to explain that because it matters. She didn't present as someone seeking rescue, or offering flattery, or playing any of the roles that you're warned about in the Expat forums and the cautionary YouTube channels that I was consuming in the months before I moved to Thailand. She presented as someone with professional knowledge in an area where I was building expertise. She was the assistant to a real estate agent with an office near Fisherman's Village on Koh Samui's north coast. And she knew property, or she knew enough about it to make intelligent conversation with someone who knew construction. And in that first conversation across a desk covered in brochures and laminated floor plans, she asked me questions about slope drainage and foundation soil assessment that I had not been asked by a Thai person before. I remember thinking, this one is different. That thought should have been the warning. It was the beginning of everything. I retired from engineering consultancy in late 2021 at 69. Later than most people would have managed it, but earlier than I'd planned, because a back injury from a site inspection in 2019 had made the physical side of field work increasingly difficult, and because my wife Louise had died in 2018 after a short illness, and the office in Canberra had, without her to come home to, become the main thing in my life in a way that wasn't healthy and that I recognized as unhealthy, without being able to fix it while I stayed in it. My son Andrew was in Melbourne. My daughter Claire was in London. The house in Barton, where Louise and I had lived for 26 years, was too large and too quiet, and too full of the specific absence of someone who'd been present in every room of it for a quarter-century. I sold it in early 2022 for AUD $1.35 million. Combined with the superannuation I'd been building since 1979 and the proceeds from selling my share of the consulting partnership, I had AUD $620,000 in liquid assets, and the kind of freedom that feels like it should be a solution and turns out to be its own kind of problem. A colleague named Shane, who'd worked with me on an infrastructure project in the Northern Territory in the 2000s, had retired to Koh Samui in 2019 and was relentlessly enthusiastic about it when we spoke on the phone. Shane was a project manager rather than an engineer, a practical and unsentimental man whose enthusiasm for Thailand I found credible precisely because it wasn't romantic. He talked about the weather, the food, the cost of living, the quality of the international hospital on the island, the accessibility of Bangkok via direct flight from Surat Thani. He didn't talk about women. He talked about the physical beauty of the island, with the detachment of someone who appreciated it the way he appreciated good sight conditions, as a practical advantage rather than an aesthetic transport. I flew to Koh Samui in September 2022 for 3 weeks. Shane picked me up from the ferry terminal at Nathon at 7 in the morning, which told me something about his character because he knew I was arriving on the early crossing from Don Sak. We had breakfast at a place he knew near Nathon Market, rice soup with ginger that I found unexpectedly good, and then he drove me around the island on the ring road before taking me to the villa I'd rented near Mae Nam on the north coast. The island is smaller than I expected, which is common. People imagine it larger from the photographs. What the photographs don't convey is the topography, the way the interior ridgelines create abrupt elevation changes, and the kind of varied slope conditions that a civil engineer reads almost involuntarily, assessing drainage implications and foundation challenges as a reflex. I spent the first afternoon on the terrace with a beer and the geological survey maps that Shane had arranged for me, which was the kind of thoughtful preparation that made him a good project manager. By the second week, I was looking at properties. By the end of the third week, I had identified the hillside plot in Chaweng Noi as the right one and had begun thinking about how to make it work. The property search was where I met Waranya. The real estate agent Shane recommended was a reputable operation near Fisherman's Village, run by a middle-aged Thai man named Prasert, who had been selling property to foreign buyers for 15 years, and who was licensed, verifiable, and transparent in a way that established credibility quickly. Waranya was his assistant and translator, responsible for managing the Thai language documentation and liaising with land offices and the relevant government departments that foreign buyers needed to navigate. She was professionally dressed in a way that I noticed because it signaled seriousness rather than presentation. No jewelry beyond a simple watch, modest clothes, a folder of documents that she'd tabbed and annotated in both Thai and English. When Prasert stepped out of the room to take a call in the second meeting, Waranya and I talked for 20 minutes about slope stability assessment for hillside villas and whether the geology of Koh Samui's interior ridgelines created particular drainage challenges. She knew enough to ask the right questions. I knew enough to be impressed by them. That was the beginning. Over the following 3 weeks, I looked at 11 properties with Prasert and Waranya. I was not, at that stage, thinking about Waranya in any terms other than professional ones. She was useful, knowledgeable, and serious in a way I found more comfortable than the performative warmth that I associated with salespeople in any country. The property I eventually identified as the right one was a 480 square meter plot on a hillside in the Chaweng Noi area, southeast facing, with clear sightlines to the bay and the kind of elevation profile that I could immediately read in terms of drainage, access, and structural opportunity. The plot was land only, no existing structure, which suited me because I wanted to design the house myself, and I didn't want to pay for someone else's decisions embedded in existing concrete. The asking price was 6.8 million baht, which at the October 2022 exchange rate was approximately AUD $278,000. I told Prasert I was interested and flew back to Canberra to think. I came back to Koh Samui in January 2023, initially for a 2-month stay in a rented villa near Lamai Beach. By that point, Waranya and I had been in email contact for the 3 months in between, ostensibly about the property purchase process and the legal structure required for a foreign buyer. Under Thai law, foreigners cannot own land freehold. The standard arrangements for foreign property buyers include a leasehold structure, typically 30 years with options to renew, or a Thai company structure with the foreigner as the controlling shareholder. Both have limitations. There is a third option that some buyers pursue, which is to place the property in the name of a Thai partner or spouse in whom they have absolute trust. I knew all of this. I had read the relevant regulations. I had asked about it specifically in the emails with Waranya, and she had explained each option with accuracy and without bias. She did not suggest the third option. I was the one who raised it, 3 months into the correspondence, as a hypothetical. Her response was careful. She said that arrangement worked well for couples with long-term committed relationships and a strong legal foundation, and that the risks without those elements were significant. That response felt, at the time, like exactly the right answer from someone with integrity. I understand now what it actually was. By February, our relationship had become personal in a way that I had not entirely planned but had not actively resisted. Waranya was methodical in how she spent time with me. The progression was not rushed, which I would have recognized as a technique, but gradual in a way that felt organic. Dinner after a property inspection. Coffee to discuss documents. A weekend drive around the island that she suggested when I mentioned I hadn't yet seen the North Coast properly. She was not effusive or demonstrative. She was, if anything, slightly reserved in a manner that I found more credible than warmth would have been. She talked about her family. A middle-class family in Surat Thani. Her father had run an agricultural supply business that had struggled in recent years. Her mother taught primary school. Her younger brother was at university in Chiang Mai. She didn't ask me for anything in those first months. I want to make that absolutely clear. Not a baht, not a favor, nothing. The groundwork she was laying did not involve money at all. It involved trust, and it involved my professional ego. And it involved making me feel, over a period of 5 months, that she understood the specific way my mind worked, and that she valued it. The property went into her name in March 2023. I want to walk through exactly how I justified this decision at the time, because the justification was not irrational, which is the thing that makes it so comprehensively difficult to explain to people who weren't inside it. Under the Thai leasehold structure, a foreign buyer can hold a 30-year lease that is registered at the land office. This is legally secure and widely used. I had investigated it thoroughly. The limitation, as I understood it from both Prasert and from my own research in the relevant Thai property law regulations, was that a leasehold does not include the right to inherit, develop, or sell without the landowner's consent, and in practice, a leasehold on a plot where I intended to build a custom structure created dependency on the landowner in ways that a civil engineer who was designing the building himself found structurally uncomfortable. The Thai company option involved ongoing administrative requirements and legal maintenance costs that for a single residential property seemed disproportionate. The third option, placing the land in the name of a Thai national, was formally the simplest in terms of title and ongoing administration. It was also, as I knew, legally the most exposed for the foreign buyer if the relationship with the Thai national broke down. What I told myself was that the relationship in question was solid, that I had 5 months of careful observation to support that assessment, and that my professional ability to evaluate people and situations meant my assessment was reliable. It was this last part that was wrong, and I knew it was the weakest link in the chain even at the time, and I proceeded anyway because I wanted the clean title, and I wanted to believe my own judgment. I paid 6.8 million baht for the land, AUD $278,000 at the exchange rate in March 2023, which transferred to Waranya's account via a standard property purchase process at the Koh Samui land office. Prasert handled the transaction with his usual professional efficiency. The Chanote transferred into Waranya's name. She received a clear freehold title on a $500,000 parcel of land that I had paid for, on the basis of a verbal understanding between us and a relationship that was 5 months old. I was 69 years old at this point. I had reviewed more contracts than most lawyers, and I signed 0 legal documentation governing our arrangement with respect to this land. No registered usufruct, no superficies agreement, no signed declaration of trust. I had a handshake, an email thread, and the conviction that my ability to assess structural integrity extended to people. The construction planning started in April. I had brought my own design software from Australia and spent 3 weeks producing a detailed set of drawings. A 3-bedroom elevated structure with a north-facing living area to catch the bay views. A drainage solution for the hillside that I was genuinely proud of, from an engineering standpoint. Solar thermal water heating. A separate studio space I'd planned as a workshop. The lot. I showed the drawings to Waranya, and she praised them with specific and accurate appreciation. She asked about the cantilevered deck structure, about the drainage pipe sizing, about the soil anchoring for the retaining walls on the lower terrace. She was asking because she had been listening carefully for months, and had absorbed enough from those conversations to know what questions would land with me. That is what I understand now. At the time I heard the questions and felt the particular pleasure of being understood by someone who made the effort to understand you, which is one of the better feelings available to human beings, and which she had learned to produce on demand. We drove to the site 3 times in April to walk it. I brought a level and a measuring tape on the second visit, out of habit, and Waranya walked the site boundaries with me without complaint, holding the tape end on the far stakes while I ran the level readings. The owner of the adjacent plot, an elderly Thai man who kept a small kitchen garden along the boundary, waved at us from across the fence on the 3rd visit and called something to Waranya. She waved back. I asked what he'd said. She said he was asking if we were building soon. I said tell him yes. She called back to him in Thai, and he nodded and returned to his garden. I remember that moment specifically. The garden, the light, the feeling that this was a piece of land with neighbors and community attached to it, not just a transaction. I was building something. That feeling was real, even if almost everything around it was not. The construction planning started in April. I had brought my own design software from Australia and spent 3 weeks producing a detailed set of drawings. A 3-bedroom elevated structure with a north-facing living area to catch the bay views. A drainage solution for the hillside that I was genuinely proud of from an engineering standpoint. Solar thermal water heating. The lot. I showed the drawings to Waranya, and she praised them with the specific and accurate appreciation of someone who understood what she was looking at, which reinforced everything about my confidence in both the project and her. I was, for that brief period in April 2023, genuinely happy. The island suited me. The project engaged me. The relationship felt functional and honest. I slept well. I was making something. In May, the first signal arrived. It was small, and I misfiled it immediately. Waranya seemed distracted during a site visit. She was usually sharp and present, but on this occasion she was checking her phone frequently and seemed to be managing something at a remove. When I asked if she was all right, she said her father's business had been having difficulties, and he was stressed. I expressed sympathy and offered help if needed. She said no, it was fine, she was handling it. That was May 7th. I know the date because I have the site visit log in my project files. On May 19th, she mentioned that her brother's university fees had become a problem because their father's business downturn had affected the family's cash flow. She said she felt responsible because she was the eldest and the only one with a stable income. She said she might need to ask her employer for an advance. I said, without being asked, that if she needed a short-term loan to bridge the family difficulty, I could help. She thanked me and said she would think about it. 2 days later, she said she needed 120,000 baht, approximately AUD $4,900, to cover the university fees through to the end of the semester. I transferred it that afternoon. She repaid 50,000 baht 6 weeks later, which I now understand was a bait repayment designed to establish pattern credibility. The remaining 70,000 baht was never mentioned again. Then one morning in late May, I got a call from Shane. He said he'd heard something, and he wanted to talk in person, not on the phone. I said come over whenever you want. He came that evening, and we sat on the terrace of the rented villa. The villa had a view toward the hills in the southeast, and you could see the general area where the plot was, though not the plot itself, and I remember noticing that, and finding it ironic afterward. He talked about a couple he'd heard about through the expat community in Beaufort. An older English man, a Thai woman in property, a land transfer that had gone wrong in the way that land transfers in Thai women's names tend to go wrong. He wasn't saying Waranya specifically. He was being careful and specific in the way of a project manager who has learned to deliver bad news accurately, rather than dramatically. He said he'd asked around about Prasert, who was fine, well regarded, nothing to worry about there. Then he paused and said, "Gerald, have you got a registered usufruct on that land?" I said no. He put his beer down on the terrace railing and looked at me. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. I told him I trusted Waranya. He said trust was good and legal documentation was better, and they weren't mutually exclusive. I said it was complicated because of how the relationship had developed, and formalizing a usufruct now might feel like I was questioning her integrity. He looked at me with the expression of a man who has managed complicated projects long enough to know that the moment someone says a risk mitigation step might make them look like they don't trust someone, they have already accepted a risk they shouldn't have accepted. He said, "Mate, get the paperwork." I said I would look into it. I looked into it for 11 days. I researched the usufruct registration process. I understood the costs, approximately 5,000 baht and a trip to the land office, and I sat with the question of how to raise it with Waranya without the conversation feeling like an accusation. I drafted a version of the conversation in my head several times. On the 11th day, Waranya suggested a weekend in Koh Tao on the ferry from Chumphan, 2 nights in a small resort she knew on the northern end of the island. It was uncomplicated and pleasant, in exactly the way that things between us were when nothing specific was happening. She was good company in the easy manner of someone who has decided to be good company and has the social intelligence to do it without effort. We ate grilled fish on the beach both evenings, and I woke up the second morning feeling absurdly optimistic. When we came back, the construction bids had arrived, and the usufruct question sank back below the waterline where I'd been keeping it. I did not raise it again. That is the decision I regret most precisely, because it was the closest I came to protecting myself, and I let the closeness pass. In June, she asked for 85,000 baht for her father's business, a supplier payment that couldn't wait. In July, 160,000 baht for a legal dispute involving the family's business property in Surat Thani. Each time I transferred the money with the slight internal friction of a man who is aware that a pattern is developing, and who is choosing not to call it a pattern. The total by the end of July was approximately 365,000 baht, which at the exchange rate was around AUD $15,000. Not catastrophic in isolation, significant in aggregate. I did not add it up in aggregate. In August, the construction bids came in. 3 local contractors, ranging from 2.1 million to 2.8 million baht for the build. I was reviewing the bids with the focused pleasure of a man doing work he understands, cross-referencing the material specifications against my drawings, when Waranya raised something I hadn't expected. She said that the contractors were quoting on the basis of a land title that had a registered encumbrance on it, and that this needed to be resolved before construction could begin. I asked what encumbrance. She said there was a minor registration matter from a previous transaction that Prasert had overlooked when he conducted the initial title search, and that a small administrative fee would resolve it. She said 200,000 baht and 2 weeks. That was the moment. Looking back, that sentence, a minor registration matter from a previous transaction, is the sentence I keep returning to. I was a civil engineer for 45 years. I had reviewed site surveys. I had reviewed foundation assessments. I had reviewed geotechnical reports. I had never, not once, accepted the phrase minor registration matter as adequate description of anything that affected a title. I had fired subcontractors for presenting me with problems described in that kind of vague, professional-sounding language. But I was in Thailand, and the document in question was in Thai, and Waranya was the person explaining it, and I believed her, because I had been believing her for 8 months, and each previous belief had been returned with sufficient credibility to reinforce the next one. I didn't transfer the 200,000 baht immediately. I said I wanted to see the documentation. She produced a document in Thai with a stamp on it that looked official and that I could not read. I told her I wanted my own legal assessment before paying anything relating to the title. She agreed readily, which I found reassuring. She recommended a lawyer in Nathan. Later, after everything came apart, I found no record of this lawyer in the relevant professional registrations. I said I'd rather find my own lawyer. She said of course. Something shifted slightly in how she was sitting when I said that. A very small thing. I noticed it and didn't know what to do with it. I found a Thai lawyer independently, through a referral from Shane's contact at the Expat Property Owners Association in Baht. The lawyer's name was Wichai, and he had an office in Chaweng, above a pharmacy on the airport road, with the particular neatness of a professional who understands that an orderly office signals an orderly mind. His professional manner established itself immediately as different from every legal interaction I'd had through Waranya's recommendations. He asked for the title reference, asked a series of crisp factual questions about the purchase structure and timeline, and made notes with the systematic efficiency of someone who has learned exactly what information matters and does not spend time on anything else. I gave him the title reference for the plot. He said he would do a full land office search and have results within 3 days. He called me on the second day. His voice was careful in the way that professionals are careful when they have found something significant and are thinking through how to present it. He said he needed me to come to his office. I drove to Chaweng that afternoon. The office was on the second floor of the commercial building, and Wichai was waiting with printouts from the land office database spread on his desk, and a yellow legal pad with handwritten notes that I could see he had been working through before I arrived. He showed me the Chanote record for the plot. The title was in Waranya's name as expected. What was not expected, what I had not known, what had not existed when the property transferred in March, or what had been registered without my knowledge in the weeks following the transfer, was a mortgage. A registered mortgage, lodged with the land office in April 2023, 12 days after the Chanote transferred into Waranya's name. The lender was a licensed finance company in Surat Thani. The loan amount, 4.8 million baht, approximately AUD, $196,000. The property, the plot I had paid for, the plot I had walked with a measuring tape, the plot with the drainage solution I was proud of, had been used as collateral for a loan of 4.8 million baht within 12 days of the title transferring into her name. I want to describe precisely what it felt like to look at that printout, because I have not seen this described accurately elsewhere, and I think accuracy matters here. There was no dramatic physical reaction. The room did not spin. My hands did not shake. What happened was a quality of stillness, the particular stillness of a mind that has just received information that does not fit any of its existing categories and is running very fast in the background trying to construct the category it belongs to. I have felt this before, on project sites, when something in a structure has failed in a way that the analysis didn't predict. The stillness before you understand what you're looking at. Then the understanding arrives, and with it the cascade of implications, each one following from the last with structural inevitability. Which I explained, with the patience of a man who had clearly done this before, what the mortgage meant in practice. The property was encumbered. The finance company held a registered security interest. If the loan was in default, and he had made further inquiries that suggested it was, as the repayments did not appear to have been made, the finance company had the right to initiate foreclosure proceedings. He said the words foreclosure and already in process in the same sentence, and I had to ask him to repeat the second part, already in process. The foreclosure had been initiated. He showed me the relevant filing date. The property I had paid AUD $278,000 for, on which I had designed a home, on which I had transferred a further AUD $15,000 in family loans, was in active foreclosure, and I had known nothing about it. I called Waranya from the car park outside Wichai's office. The car park was small and dusty, and a stray cat was sleeping on the bonnet of a pickup truck in the shade. I mention this because the mind does what it does in extreme moments, which is anchor itself to irrelevant specifics, the cat, the dust, the heat on the back of my neck, while it processes the unprocessable. She answered on the third ring. Her voice was normal in a way that, given what I had just learned, was either complete composure or confirmation of what I was already thinking. I told her I'd had an independent legal search done. I told her what it had found. There was a silence. Not a guilty silence exactly, more the silence of someone calculating how much has been established and how to respond to exactly that amount. Then she said, "Gerald, I can explain." I said, "Go ahead." She said her father's business debts had been more serious than she'd indicated, that the family had been facing a creditor action that threatened their home in Surat Thani, and that she had used the property as collateral to raise funds to clear the debt. She said she had intended to repay the loan from the profit of a family land sale that had since fallen through. She said she had been planning to tell me. She said, "I did it for us, for our future. I was going to fix it." She did not say she was sorry. Not once in that phone call did she use the word sorry. What she said, when I pushed her on the sequence of events, was that she had made a mistake in not telling me, and that she had believed she could resolve it before I found out, and that she needed me to help her resolve it now, because if the foreclosure completed, there would be nothing left for either of us. The audacity of that last sentence, nothing left for either of us, as if I were a partner in a shared enterprise, rather than the person whose money had been used to fund her family's debt without my knowledge, is the thing that burned through the numbness. Not grief, not betrayal in the soft sense of the word, cold, specific rage, the kind that doesn't need to be loud. I called Shane that evening and told him what I'd found. He was quiet for a long moment, and then he said, "Gerald, I'm sorry. I should have pushed harder in May." I told him it wasn't his job to push harder. It was my job to listen to him when he said get the paperwork, and I hadn't listened. He asked what I was going to do. I said I was going to talk to Wichai in the morning about what options existed, and I was going to be precise about what I did next. The options Wichai outlined the next morning were the kind of options that exist when you have waited too long. I could initiate a civil claim against Waranya for the return of the purchase price, on the basis that the funds were provided for a specific purpose and the property had been encumbered without my consent. He said that claim was valid in principle and difficult in practice. Thai civil proceedings are slow, Waranya's disclosed assets were limited, and the property itself was already in foreclosure, which meant the primary asset was beyond recovery regardless of a civil judgment. I could engage with the finance company directly to attempt to negotiate a resolution. The loan was 4.8 million baht, and if I paid it off I would clear the mortgage, but the title would still be in Waranya's name, and I would be further exposed. Or I could leave and accept the loss and move forward. He said this with professional neutrality, as a man listing options without recommending one, but the mathematics were clear. The first two paths each led to additional expenditure in pursuit of uncertain outcomes. The third path cost nothing further, and was certain. The financial audit took me 2 days with a spreadsheet and my bank records. Land purchase, AUD $278,000. Transfer fees and stamp duty at settlement, AUD $11,200. Personal loans to Waranya from May through July, AUD $14,900. Legal fees with Wichai, AUD $2,800. Total, AUD $306,900. Nearly all my liquid assets, leaving approximately AUD $313,100, which sounds like enough until you factor in that I was 71 years old, that inflation and healthcare costs compound differently at that age than at 50, and that AUD $313,100 in Canberra in 2024 represents a different kind of security than it did in 2019. I left Koh Samui in April 2023. I packed what I had in the rented villa, which was not much. I had been renting furnished and the property itself had never been built, and Shane drove me to the ferry at Nathan. It was early morning. The light on the water, the particular pale gold of the Gulf of Thailand, before the day heat built, and I remember thinking that the island was exactly as beautiful as it had been the morning Shane picked me up from this same ferry terminal 7 months earlier, and that none of what had happened in those 7 months had changed the island at all. The island had not done this to me. I was entirely clear-eyed about that. A person had done this to me, and the way she had done it was to correctly identify that my professional confidence was the specific thing that made me most vulnerable, and to use it accordingly. I am back in Canberra now. I have the rental in Gungahlin and the superannuation income and the AUD $313,100 that I am managing carefully because I cannot afford another mistake of any kind at 71. My son Andrew visited in June, and we had dinner at a place near the town center that I used to go to with Louise, and he asked if I was doing all right in the way children ask that question when they are managing worry behind the words. I told him I was fine. I meant it, mostly, which surprised me. He asked if I was angry. I thought about that for a moment. I said the anger had done what anger does when you let it run its course. It burned fast and hot, and then it organized itself into something more useful, which was a very precise understanding of exactly what had happened and exactly what I would do differently. Andrew looked at me across the dinner table and said, "That sounds like you." He meant it as a compliment. I took it as one. Claire called from London the following week. She had heard from Andrew. She was less restrained than Andrew in the way that younger children sometimes are. She had not had as long to learn the particular tact of someone who worries about a surviving parent without wanting to add to that parent's burdens. She said, "Dad, how did you not see it?" I said that was the question I'd been working on since April, and that the answer had to do with the specific way professional expertise creates blind spots rather than eliminates them. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'm just glad you're home." That was the right thing to say. She is very much like her mother. The financial audit I completed on my kitchen table in Canberra in May, with a calculator and 3 months of bank records and the documents which I had sent electronically, came to this. Land purchase, AUD $278,000. Transfer fees and stamp duty at settlement, AUD $11,200. Personal loans to Waranya from May through July 2023, AUD $14,900. Legal fees with which and a brief engagement with a second Thai lawyer who confirmed his assessment, AUD $4,800. Return flights and accommodation during the legal process, AUD $7,100. Total, AUD $316,000. A number that started at AUD $620,000 in liquid assets and finished at AUD $304,000, which is the specific and permanent cost of the conviction that my analytical skills generalize to every domain I chose to apply them in. They do not. I know that now in a way I will carry for the rest of my life, which at 71 is a finite number of years, and represents a high price per year for a lesson I could theoretically have learned without paying it. What I am not is naive in the particular way I was naive when I arrived on Koh Samui. The rage has settled into something cooler and more permanent. Not bitterness exactly, because bitterness requires ongoing energy and I have better uses for what I have left, but a precise and permanent recalibration of where I locate trust in the sequence of events. After verification, not before. Here is what I want to say about the professional confidence problem, because it's the thing that I haven't heard discussed clearly enough in the cautionary accounts I've read since. Professional expertise creates a specific kind of vulnerability that is different from ignorance. An ignorant person at least knows they don't know things and may seek help. A person with deep professional expertise in an adjacent field, in my case built environment and structural assessment, believes that their existing analytical framework is sufficient to evaluate the new domain, when in fact, the new domain has different mechanisms and different failure modes and different techniques for exploiting the specific blind spots that expertise creates. I was not deceived the way a naive person is deceived. I was deceived the way a very confident person is deceived, through the confidence itself. Waranya asked me questions about drainage gradients and foundation assessment, not because she was genuinely interested in civil engineering, but because those questions told her immediately how I evaluated credibility and what kind of person I was most likely to trust. The targeting was precise. She had, I believe, done this before, or had enough experience with men like me to understand the profile. A professional man in his late 60s or early 70s, recently widowed or recently retired, with significant liquid assets and the particular social loneliness of someone whose identity has been wrapped in a career that has now ended. She didn't romance that profile. She respected it. And respecting it, in the specific technical professional way that she did, was the most effective technique available. If you are reading this and you are someone with professional expertise, engineering, law, finance, medicine, anything, I am telling you that your expertise is not a protection in this context. In this context, it is a profile. It tells a skilled person exactly how to position themselves to reach you. The fact that I could assess slope stability on a Koh Samui hillside did not help me assess the person standing on that hillside beside me. Those are different skills, and I had only one of them. Never, under any circumstances, place Thai property in a partner's name without a registered usufruct, a superficies agreement, or a signed declaration of trust that has been reviewed by an independently selected Thai lawyer. Do that paperwork before you transfer a single baht, not after, not when the relationship is solid enough to formalize. Before. Shane told me this on my terrace in May, and I am telling you now, and the difference between his version and mine is that he told me in time, and I did not take it. You are reading this. You still have time. The light on the Gulf of Thailand at 5:30 in the morning from the Nathon ferry terminal is genuinely extraordinary. The kind of light that an engineer notices for its quality and direction, and what it reveals about the surface topography of the water, the angle of incidence, the scatter pattern, the way it catches the wake of the early fishing boats. Shane stood on the dock with me until the ferry boarding started, and we shook hands, and he said nothing, because there was nothing left that needed saying between two men who had worked together long enough to understand when that was true. I walked up the boarding ramp and didn't look back. Not because it was dramatic, but because looking back would not have changed the Chanote, or the mortgage, or the foreclosure filing date of April 14, 2023. Some structures, once they have failed, cannot be repaired at the site. You document the failure, you update the analysis, and you build better the next time. That doesn't feel like the right note to end on either, but it's the engineering of it, and at 71, it's what I've got.